Hi, it's Miss Pam from the Andes Public Library, and welcome to our Halloween story time. It's Wednesday, October 28th, and I have some really neat stories for you today. First, we're going to have Creepy Carrots by Reynolds and pictures by Peter Brown. We have The Halloween Tree, words by Susan Montanari and pictures by Teresa Martinez. The Witches Broom by Chris van Allsburg. And then maybe we'll finish up, if we have time, with an early reader version of The Headless Horseman with Ichabod Crane, Washington Irving's famous story, adapted by Natalie Standiford and illustrated by Donald Cook. Okay, so let's get right to Creepy Carrots. This was a Caldecott Award winner, so. Creepy Carrots. Let's see here. We'll go on this side today. How's that? Jasper Rabbit had a passion for carrots, and the carrots that grew in Crackenhopper Field were the best, fat, crisp, and free for the taking. He pulled some off for a morning snack on the way to school. He yanked out a few on his way to Little League practice. He ripped them from the ground on his way home at night. Jasper couldn't get enough carrots. Until they started following him. He first noticed something strange after the big game against the East Valley Hares. Jasper was about to help himself to a victory snack. Then he heard it, the soft, sinister tunk, tunk, tunk of carrots creeping. He turned, but nothing was there. Just my imagination, he thought, but he hopped a little faster. That night, as he was brushing his teeth, they were there. Jasper whipped around, but nothing. He laughed at himself, picked up his toothbrush off the floor, and went to bed quickly. The next morning, he approached Crackenhopper Field slowly. He reached for 2 wild carrots. Nothing happened. He bit into one. Nothing happened. Phew, creepy carrots. It was ridiculous. But when he arrived home that evening, "Mom, Mom," Jasper screamed, "creepy carrots in the shed." His mom opened the door slowly. There weren't any carrots, not even the regular kind. "There are no such things as creepy carrots," Mom said, shaking her head. Later that night, as Jasper lay in bed, he heard it breathing, terrible, carroty breathing. And there on his wall, the shadow. "Creepy carrots!" he shouted. "Dad, Dad!" His dad thumped into his bedroom and threw on the light. They searched under the bed. No creepy carrots. They looked through the closet. No creepy carrots. They opened the dresser drawers. No creepy carrots. "Just a bad dream, son," his dad said, shaking his head. "Now go to sleep." That wasn't going to happen. By the end of the week, Jasper was seeing creepy carrots creeping everywhere. Jasper knew his parents were wrong. Creepy carrots were real, and they were coming for him. But they couldn't get him if they couldn't get out. He has an idea. Look, there's a light bulb. Jasper hatched a plan. First thing on Saturday, he grabbed supplies and headed to Crackenhopper Field. And he made a fence. And now he's digging a trench and making a moat and building a wall. As the sun finally set across Crackenhopper Field, Jasper Rabbit smiled. On his way home, there were no tunk, tunk, tunks. There were no carrot-shaped shadows. His plan had worked. No creepy carrots would ever get out of that carrot patch again. Wow, where did he get the alligators? As the sun finally set, the carrots of Crackenhopper Field, oh, they're peeking, cheered. Their creepy carrot plan had worked. They were sure of it. Jasper Rabbit would never get into that carrot patch ever again. The end. Aw, tricky carrots. All right, how about the Halloween tree? Let's see what's going on with this one. So we're going it from this side today. I'm used to doing it from the other side. The Halloween tree, words by Susan Montanari and pictures by Teresa Martinez. Look, we got multiple holidays in this book. The Christmas tree farm bustled with excitement. Carols played as families moved up and down the row of tall pine trees, exclaiming, "This one is beautiful. That one is perfect." Looking at the fancy decorated tree at the front, one sapling grumbled, "I don't like lights, I don't like decorations, and I don't like people." As trees disappeared off the lot, the little tree mumbled, "I don't want to be a Christmas tree. I never want to leave this spot." The little tree listened as the other saplings buzzed with anticipation. "I can't wait," a sprout whispered. "Colored lights one side. I hope I get a star on my top," said another. The little tree grumbled, "I don't want to become a Christmas tree, and I'm not going to." As the little tree grew, its limbs became gnarled and twisted. Every time needles sprouted, thoughts of being decorated with lights and ornaments made them brown and fall off. The tree looked nothing like the others. One day, all the trees of the lot disappeared, all except one. Eventually, houses began to appear, and with houses came families. By then, the tree had grown tall and broad. Its limbs were twisted and covered with strange knobs. One summer, the tree heard children's voices coming near and scoffed. "Ugh, people." "Yikes," a boy named Ben cried. "That tree looks grumpy." "I like it," his sister Sarah said as she touched a branch. "It's so creepy. I dare you to climb it," their friend Thomas challenged her. Sarah pulled herself up onto the tree and sat in a cozy bough. "It's a pirate ship," she shouted and waved for the others to join her. All the children climbed aboard. When the neighborhood kids needed a hideout, the tree became their fort. When they played astronauts and aliens, it was their spaceship. And one foggy day, the tree even turned into a dragon. When winter came, a cold wind blew, and the children didn't come outside to play. The tree, with its limbs empty, stood all alone. On a snowy afternoon, the tree watched as Sarah and Ben's father carried a large bundle into the house. That night, a Christmas tree appeared in the window. "I don't like lights, I don't like decorations, and I don't like people," the tree whispered, but it couldn't turn away. The next year, the same thing happened. The kids played in the branches until the snow began to fall, and the tree wished for lights, decorations, and people, things it had never wanted before. One spring, the tree tried to make its needles grow properly, but after years of trying to stop them, they came out looking all wrong. By summer, they had fallen off. A few months later, Sarah and Ben's parents were decorating for Halloween. Their father looked across the yard and said, "That is one horrible old tree. We should cut it down," their mother agreed. "Not now," the tree thought. "Not now that my limbs are full of happy children." Up in the branches, Sarah whispered, "No, they can't. We have to save our tree," Thomas cried. "I know what to do," Ben said, and whispered his plan to the other kids. They climbed down and raced away to gather the supplies. When they came back, Ben was already up in the tree, wedging a huge jack-o'-lantern in a nook. They all climbed up, and from the tree's branches they hung white and orange lights, cobwebs made of string, rubber spiders, cardboard cats, bats, ghosts, witches, and skeletons. That night, the parents and all the neighbors gathered to admire the tree. The children danced beneath, shouting "Trick or treat" to each other. Aww. "I guess I was wrong," the tree thought. "I do like lights, I do like decorations, and I do like people. I love being a Halloween tree." Aww. All right, now we have The Widow's Broom. Chris Van Allsburg. Witches' brooms don't last forever. They grow old, and even the best of them one day lose the power of flight. Fortunately, this does not happen in an instant. A witch can feel the strength slowly leaving her broom. The sudden bursts of energy that once carried her quickly into the sky become weak. Longer and longer running starts are needed for takeoff. Speedy brooms that in their youth outraced hawks are passed by slow flying geese. When these things happen, a witch knows it's time to put her old broom aside and have a new one made. On very rare occasions, however, a broom can lose its power without warning and fall with its passenger to the earth below, which is just what happened one cold autumn night many years ago. The witch is falling! The witch is falling! Out of a moonlit sky, a dark cloaked figure came spinning to the ground. The witch, along with her tired broom, landed beside a small white farmhouse, the home of a lonely widow named Minnie Shaw. At daybreak, Widow Shaw discovered the witch lying in her vegetable garden. She was bruised and bloody and couldn't stand up on her own. In spite of her fear, and because she was a kind woman, Minnie Shaw helped the witch inside and put her to bed. The witch asked Minnie Shaw to draw the curtains, then wrapped herself tightly in her black cape and fell soundly asleep. She lay there perfectly still all day and all evening. When she finally awoke at midnight, her wounds had completely healed. She rose from the bed and moved silently through the widow's house. Minnie Shaw was asleep in a chair by the fireplace, where embers of a dying fire glowed on the hearth. The witch knelt and took one of the red-hot coals in her hand. Outside she made a fire of leaves and twigs, then dropped a strand of her hair into the flame. The fire hissed and crackled, burned with a brilliant, bright blue light. Before long the witch could see a dark form flying overhead. It was another witch who circled slowly and landed beside the fire. The two women spoke briefly, the first witch gesturing towards the garden where her old broom rested. Then they sat side by side on the second witch's broom and flew off over the treetops. When Minnie Shaw woke up, she wasn't surprised to find that her guest had gone. Witches, she knew, had unusual powers. It didn't surprise her either when she saw that the old broom had been left behind. The widow guessed it had lost its magic. It was an ordinary broom now, just like the one she kept in her kitchen. She began using it around the house and found it was no better or worse than brooms she had used before. One morning Minnie Shaw was still in bed when she heard a noise coming from the kitchen. She peeked in and saw something that made her heart jump. There was the broom sweeping the floor all by itself. It stopped for a moment and turned to the widow, then went back to work. At first Minnie was frightened, but the broom seemed harmless, and what's more, it was doing a very good job. Unfortunately, it swept all day long. In the evening, to get some peace, she locked the broom in a closet, but when it tapped on the door for more than an hour, Minnie felt guilty and let it out. As she lay in bed listening to the broom sweeping each room over and over, she wondered if it could learn to do other things. In the morning she led the broom outside and found out that it was a very good student. She needed to show it how to do something only once. Soon the broom could chop wood and fetch water, feed the chickens, and bring the cow in from the pasture. It could even pick out simple tunes on the piano. Not a week passed before the widow's neighbors, the Spivvies, found out about the broom. Their farm was just down the road, the only other place around. It was one of the 8 Spivvy children who saw the broom first. When the boy told his father, Mr. Spivvy ran straight across the road to the widow's house. "Is it true?" he demanded. "Did she really have such a broom?" "Oh, yes," Minnie Shaw answered. "It's wonderful." She told her neighbor all about the broom and the witch who had left it behind. Then she took him around to the back of the house where the broom was hard at work splitting wood. Mr. Spivvy was horrified. "This is a wicked, wicked thing," he said. "This is the devil." The broom stopped working and, still clutching the axe, hopped towards the widow and her neighbor. Mr. Spivvy, red-faced with anger, turned quickly and hurried home. Soon more distant neighbors heard about the broom and visited the widow's farm. The men who saw it seemed to agree it probably was a wicked thing, but their wives pointed out that it was a great help to the widow and could play the piano well, considering it struck just one note at a time. No one's feelings were as strong as Mr. Spivvy's. "It's evil and it's dangerous," he told everyone who would listen. "We'll all be sorry if this thing stays among us." As days went by, the broom seemed as innocent and hard-working as ever. Though it had learned how to do many things, sweeping brought it special pleasure. It was, after all, a broom. Occasionally, when there was nothing left to do around the widow's house, it would hop down to the road that separated Minnie Shaw's and the Spivvy's farms. The road was dirt, of course, and the broom could amuse itself there for hours. One afternoon, Two Spivvy boys and their dog walked along the road where the broom was happily at work. When they saw what it was doing, they kicked the small stones the broom had swept aside back into its path. The broom ignored them and shuffled off to sweep another part of the road. But the Spivvy boys would not leave it alone. They called the broom names. When it continued to ignore them, he picked up a couple of sticks and started tapping the broom's handle. Finally it stopped sweeping. The broom turned to the two boys and knocked them both on the head so hard they fell on the ground in tears. The broom hopped off, but the Spivvy dog ran after it, yapping and biting at its bristles. "Get him!" the boys yelled. The little dog leaped into the air and caught the broom by the handle, but he was not there for long. Ow! Look at what happened. The broom goes, whee, and over. The dog's flying away. I know that's not nice. I shouldn't laugh. That evening, Mr. Spivvy drove his wagon up to the widow's house. He was not alone. 3 men from the neighboring farms were in the wagon, along with a long wooden stake and coils of rope. Mr. Spivvy knocked loudly. When she opened her door, Minna was frightened by what she saw. "We've come for the broom," her neighbor told her. "It's beaten my sons and likely done worse to my dog. The poor animal is nowhere to be found." The widow could tell by their faces that the men would not be leaving without her broom. There was nothing she could do to stop them. For a moment she stood silently, then answered, "Of course you are right. If it could do such a thing, we must get rid of it." She led the men to her kitchen. "It sleeps in here," she whispered, pointing to a closet. "If you move it carefully, it will not wake up." The men knew how strong the broom was and hoped the widow was right. They opened the closet door, revealing the slumbering broom. One of the farmers took it out and gently held it against the stake while the others wrapped it in yards of rope. They carried the broom outside, drove the stake into the ground, and gathered straw around it. Mr. Spivvy lit the fire. In no time flames turned the broom to ashes. Life soon returned to normal around the widow's farm. The Spivvies even found their dog, healthy but hungry, caught in the branches of a tall spruce tree. Then one morning Minna Shaw called on her neighbors with frightening news. She had seen the ghost of the broom. It was as white as snow and moved through the woods at night carrying an axe. Mr. Spivvy did not believe her, but that night, under a full moon, he watched from a window as the broom's white ghost came out of the wood and slowly circled his house. The next night it returned, circling even closer, and the night after it, it came again, tapping the axe lightly on the Spivvy's door. Oh, there's the ghostly broom. That's pretty scary. The next morning, Mr. and Mrs. Spivvy packed their dearest possessions and 8 children into their wagon. Mr. Spivvy tried to convince the widow to leave with them, but she chose to stay behind in her little farmhouse. She went down to the road as her wagon pulled away and waved goodbye to her neighbors. "You're a brave woman," Mr. Spivvy called out. That evening the widow fell asleep in her chair by the fire. She'd been listening to music, simple tunes played one note at a time on the piano. A gentle tap on the shoulder woke her. She looked up and smiled at the broom, not a ghost at all, but still covered with the coat of white paint she had given it. "You play so nicely," Minna Shaw said. The broom bowed, put a log on the fire, and played another tune. Did she trick them? She tricked them. She gave them her other broom that stayed in the closet, and they burned that. That was a surprise ending. Okay, so I hope we have a little extra time for an early reader version of Washington Irving's The Headless Horseman, adapted by Natalie Standiford and illustrated by Donald Cook. Now, this is a story, for those of you who don't know, that originated a few hours south of us, where we live here in the Catskills, a little town called Sleepy Hollow is what they've made the name into now, and back then that was the name of the town, but it was right around Tarrytown, New York. And this is a lovely story that has lasted for generations and generations. Once there was a town called Sleepy Hollow. It was a drowsy little town in a pretty green valley. Life there was always peaceful and quiet. But at night the town was too quiet. Then you might see something move in the shadows. Then you might hear something moan in the dark. Then you might believe Sleepy Hollow was haunted. The people who lived there thought the whole valley was haunted. They told strange tales about ghosts and goblins and witches. The strangest tale of all was the story of the Headless Horseman. During the war, began the story, a bloody battle was fought in the valley. Swords clashed, cannons boomed, and one soldier on horseback lost his head. His headless body was buried in the church graveyard. The tombstone reads, "Rest in peace," but the poor soul buried there cannot rest. Now, on nights when the moon is full, he rises from the grave. He mounts his phantom horse and rides through the valley looking for his head. So beware of the Headless Horseman. If he cannot find his head, he will gladly take yours. No one believed in ghost stories more than the schoolteacher Ichabod Crane. He was an odd-looking fellow, tall and skinny, with dangling arms and floppy feet. When he walked down the street, he looked just like a scarecrow off of its post. Ichabod was poor, but he had a plan. He was going to marry Katrina Van Tassel. Her father was the richest squire in the valley. Ichabod wanted to be just like him. Brom Bones also wanted to marry Katrina. Brom was a friendly young man. He liked to play tricks and ride horses and have fun. All the young ladies liked him, especially Katrina. Ichabod did his best to win Katrina's heart. He read his favorite books to her. He sang his favorite songs to her. He told her all about himself. And she looks a little bored of that, right? Naturally, Brom Bones was jealous, so he played a trick on Ichabod. Late one night, Brom sneaked into the schoolhouse. He turned the whole place topsy-turvy. When Ichabod arrived in the morning, he was horrified. Witches must have held a meeting there. He was afraid to teach that day. Then one afternoon, an invitation came. The Van Tassels were having a party. Ichabod jumped for joy. He sent his pupils home and started getting ready. He put on his one and only suit. He combed his hair. He borrowed a broken-down horse and set out for Katrina's house. The sun was still shining as he rode along. It was harvest time in the valley. Everything was golden. Ichabod whistled a happy tune. But when he rode into the woods, the light faded. Ichabod stopped whistling. He went over to the bridge and passed the church. Then he saw the church graveyard. It gave him the shivers. Ichabod's horse was very slow. It was already dark when Ichabod arrived at the party. Katrina's house was lit up like the moon. Someday, thought Ichabod, all this will be mine. Then some other poor sap will be the school teacher, and I won't even invite him to my parties. Ichabod went inside. Katrina was dancing with Brom Bones. He tapped Brom on the shoulder. "Ahem," he said. "May I cut in?" Brom stepped aside and let Ichabod dance with Katrina. By and by, Brom tapped Ichabod, but Ichabod would not step aside. Instead, he twirled Katrina away. Brom was angry. Later that evening, Brom went outside. An old man was telling ghost stories, and there was Ichabod believing every word. "I saw the Headless Horseman just last night," said Brom. "He raced me for a cup of punch. I would have won, too, but as soon as I crossed the church bridge, the Headless Horseman vanished into a flash of fire." Ichabod's eyes grew wide. Brom smiled. Perhaps the Headless Horseman would ride that very night. The party was over. Ichabod was the last to leave. He was miserable. He had asked Katrina to marry him, but she had turned him down. It was midnight as he rode towards home. The woods had never seemed so dark. An owl hooted, a frog croaked, a dog howled in the distance. Clouds hid the moon. The woods were darker than ever. To cheer himself up, Ichabod began to whistle. Suddenly, someone whistled back. Ichabod looked around. In the shadows stood a huge dark shape. Ichabod's horse stopped dead. Just then the moon came out from behind the clouds. The huge dark shape began to look like a horse. On top of the horse sat a man, and on top of the man's shoulders sat nothing. But there was a head under his arm. Ichabod screamed, "The Headless Horseman!" Ichabod remembered Brom's story. If he only could cross the church bridge, then he would be safe. He kicked his horse. "Go, go," urged Ichabod in a whisper, but the horse would not budge. He kicked his horse again. Finally, the old horse dashed forward. The Headless Horseman dashed forward, too. Away they went in a race to the bridge, Ichabod riding for his life, Ichabod leaning forward. Faster, faster, the horse clattered over the bridge, with Ichabod clinging to its back. Was he safe? Ichabod glanced back. The Headless Horseman had stopped. Suddenly his horse reared up, and with a chilling laugh, the Headless Horseman hurled his head across the bridge, right at Ichabod Crane. The next morning, Ichabod's horse was found nibbling the grass at the edge of town. But where was Ichabod Crane? The people of Sleepy Hollow set out to look for him. They found his hat near the church bridge. They found a smashed pumpkin next to the hat. But Ichabod himself they never found. People could think of only one reason for Ichabod's disappearance. The Headless Horseman had carried him away. A farmer had said he had seen a man who looked like Ichabod in another valley far away. But no one believed him. Everybody knew that Ichabod's ghost now haunted the old church bridge. When Brom Bones heard these stories, he would get a sneaky look on his face. If he knew what really really happened, he wasn't telling. I hope you have a happy and safe Halloween, and I'll see you next week. Bye.